I've lost I don't know what I did with it, my phone stand. So I don't know. I feel like I can't get a normal angle. Everything's a bit distorted, but that's not important. So the topic of Virginia Giuffre, her recent death, it's all really touchy, okay? It's really sensitive. You know, her situation and the history for the last few decades, it's really complicated. And there's lots of different sides to the story, no matter, wherever people are, whatever their position is as a satellite around her, and whatever their relationship is, it's a very troubling situation. It's complicated. There's not just one easy from A to B to C all the way up to Z, because everything has a flip side. This is definitely a life story and a series of stories where, if ever the expression, different sides to a coin is true, it's around Virginia Giuffre and, and her life and times. So there's a few things that I think probably happened, and of course, again, all I can do is speculate. I'm not sure how the lighting is affecting things here. Just hang on while we wait and see if anyone's going to pop in. If not, they can listen later anyway. Because I've also lost, I've got to get a Ring camera or something so that I can get light properly and look, fresh and everything. All right, so just briefly, Virginia's name, it's Virginia Louise Roberts, and she was born on August the 9th in 1983. So not that horoscopes have anything to do with it, but Virginia was a Chinese horoscope, a water pig, and she's a Leo. So I thought this was quite interesting, excuse me. Ask me about my dog. So I thought this was interesting because, she's like fire and water. She's the fire sign of the Leo and the water sign. And I just can imagine just, esoterically, right? Esoterically, that this would bring a lot of emotional intensity, a lot of emotional dichotomy, a lot of a need for control, and a lot of need for acceptance and vulnerability and things. I can just imagine I could imagine what her astrology chart would look like. All right, so hey Stang, hello, thanks for your message the other day. So she's passed away at 41 years of age. She came from a family in America. She was born in California. Her father, I think the step brothers, Sky and Daniel, might be both her biological father's sons. So they're her step brothers, and they lived in California in Sacramento for 4 years. They went to Loxahatchee after that. They've ended up in Palm Beach County, and by any account, I don't think it is, the thing is, we've got families in crisis, families in trauma, families dealing with a lot of the weight of their history. we've got to be careful not to victim blame or lay blame, but her home was troubled. Her home was clearly troubled. And by 7 years old, she was already a victim of sexual abuse by, a family friend, a close family friend. So, hey, some great family friend, right? And this has really set Victoria up for turmoil. She's ended up living on the streets. She's been running away from this, and then she's ended up in foster homes. It's hard to work out the age with which she was with Ron Eppinger. I'm not sure if it was 11 or 13. She certainly was around scumbags for a lot of her life. She ended up with this famous trafficker and actually lived with him. He was 65 and she was 11 or 12 or 13, something like that, and lived with him for 6 months. This guy is famous for his so-called Perfect 10 modeling studio, and yeah, evil Charles, buck your ideas up, because when you come in and you go, oh, fun, you just make yourself look like a real dick. And but we say these things and then we move on. So Eppinger, he's sort of caught up in a whole lot of sex trafficking through his Miami agency called A Perfect 10. He was raided by the FBI at some stage. There's a whole thing about him you can look up, So that's Ron Eppinger. She reunites with her father when she's 14 years old, and her father's working at the Donald Trump Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Springs. So it's a hotel resort thing. It's offering spa services. He's a maintenance man there. Now, for all intents and purposes, this father called Sky, just like one of his sons, who's not only failed to protect her at age 7, for some reason he's groomed by Epstein. He thought Epstein was a really lovely guy, just a regular guy, because he wore jeans and a t-shirt, and he invited me to his house. It was really nice. He's just so welcoming, so down to earth. You've reunited with your daughter, you're working at a hotel, you're getting groomed by these rich, powerful men into offering your daughter up on a plate. Whose idea was it that Virginia Roberts was, as the legend was reading a book about being a massage therapist when she was discovered by Ghislaine at the Mar-a-Lago? I don't know how this all happened. We'll never really know, okay? But it's like she's just been offered up on a platter. Now, she says herself that, when she was being sex trafficked, it was like being passed around like a plate of fruit. And what I was saying about Sky Roberts is, look, he's just reunited with his daughter. She's going to the Royal Palm, what's that place? Where are they? Palm Springs High School. Let her be a kid. Let her go to high school. Okay, now maybe she wanted to earn some money. Maybe he wanted, it's quite normal for a 14-year-old, at least it used to be, to have work and everything, right? But I feel like she needed to be able to come home to be a child and not come home and be presented to abusers. It's just the pattern of her life that was already set up from 7 years of age, that she wouldn't be able to really make the best decisions, that she possibly couldn't she can't protect herself, and I'm going to talk about what I think's happened and the type of damage that she suffered. And instead of coming home to heal, she's already probably been trafficked by Ron Eppinger, and she's been with a lot of older men by this stage. She eventually gets home to her family and they don't protect her again. Father does not protect her again. And in fact, he's practically groomed into letting her run off. Someone had to sign for her passport as a minor so that she could travel around the world. She was on St. Little James, Epstein's Island. She did go to his other houses in Manhattan, New Mexico. She was at his house in Palm Beach on the island, as I said. And yeah, this is pretty sad. So between 2000 and 2022, or actually for about 2.5 years, she was used by Ghislaine and Epstein. Now, there's a lot of lawsuits and everything, and one of them is around another woman who Virginia had named as someone else that was there and who had actually slashed her in a sadomasochistic game that was being performed for Epstein between Virginia and this woman. But the other woman is fighting back, saying this is absolutely bananas and it's not true. So she was countersued by someone, but she's named more than one person. She has named more than Epstein and more than Prince Andrew, and no one else has sued her, but this other woman did. Anyway, September 2002, she has a ticket paid for and schooling paid for by Ghislaine Maxwell to go to Chiang Mai in Thailand to go to the International Training Massage School so that she can get qualifications. And, this could be framed as so that you can have qualifications, leave us, off you go and have a career, support yourself. But there's a lot of allegations around Virginia from other girls that, that she was actually the one who was bringing girls into the ring and that sort of thing, grooming them herself, introducing them. Maybe she was going to get the training so that she could then teach them, and it would be more of a guise of giving it some sort of credibility at first, right? So she actually alleges that she was told that she was to go there, do this course, and return with a Thai girl, take this other girl back to Ghislaine. Instead, she met Roberts Guiffre, and I find this, this is something that a psychotic person might look at, right? Is she was Victoria Roberts, and now she meets Roberts Guiffre, which is like the Joffrey from the French and German, and it sort of kind of links her and Jeffrey together as a unit, doesn't it, with those two names? But he was an Australian martial arts trainer. I don't know what he was doing in Thailand. Was he doing some more study? Was he teaching? Was he there in events or just traveling around? Not sure. But he was a little bit older than her, possibly 5 years or so. And they get married very quickly. So when she's 19, she's married. They do head down to... they do live in Australia for a while. In New South Wales, and then they live overseas again, back in the USA. She's in Florida, she's in Colorado. Her father reckons that while she lived back in America that he did see her kind of regularly, but they have been estranged. She's estranged from her family of origin and of her nuclear family that she created at the time of her death. So from they came back to Australia, lived in Cairns briefly, and then went over to Perth in 2020. And by 2023, she's separated from her husband, and things were going through the courts as well. Allegations from her about domestic abuse, allegations from him. He had a type of restraining order out on her. She was due to be in court to do with custody of her 3 children. So again, briefly, what's happened with everything coming out to light. In March 2005, the Palm Beach police, they start investigating Epstein because a 14-year-old didn't actually go along with everything. In fact, she reported what happened, and this has kicked off a whole investigation. People start getting in contact with Virginia, so Ghislaine Maxwell, and then Epstein contacts her, and so does the FBI, all within a 6-month period throughout 2007. But it isn't until, they're not getting anywhere with her, and then it's not until the Australian Federal Police in 2007 contact her 6 months later, after the FBI contacted her, that Hi, Ali Daraj. So 6 months later. So in May 2009, she's named, she's Jane Doe 102, files against Epstein. She's accusing Maxwell of recruiting people into sex trafficking, accusing Ghislaine basically of doing this while she was a minor. And there's a lot that's gone on throughout the years. She, in 2014, that's when she sets up a non-profit 501c3, and it was registered in 2015. Now, it was called something with her initials in it, which I found interesting. It was called, just can't remember it offhand. I'm so sorry about this, so I just need to find it. It was called the Victims Regaining. Oh, sorry guys, this is really badly presented. Because I forgot I put it on here. She had the Victims Refuse Silence. So VR, I wonder what she thought the S really stood for, if VR could be Victoria Roberts. Now, that's interesting because that's when she was first starting to get into legal matters where she might be receiving monies, and starts receiving monies, and she rebrands it in 2019 to SOAR, Speak Out, Act, Reclaim. Now, they don't actually do anything. This is a whole thing with these types of things. Oh no, but she was an advocate and she was working to save people and she's got her charity set up and everything. No, it's, what they do is, speakers for events and things like that. So basically what that means is it's advertising her as being available, I think, for interviews, etc. That's what I think. So look, there's a whole series of things that are happening throughout the years with her, with the legal battles and everything, different disclosures, different times that things were unsealed. She wrote this book. She wrote the story of her life, kind of like a memoir, kind of, and then that was unsealed. It was used as evidence. It was just a way of her producing her evidence. In August the 9th, which is her birthday, isn't it? Documents were unsealed. Epstein was found dead in his cell the next day, August 10th, 2019. In October the 19th, this is when Virginia does her BBC interview. So she recorded it and then it aired on December the 2nd. And this is the one I think where she speaks out about Epstein and Prince Andrew, and it might be where she showed that photograph. There is so much falsity about that photograph. You've got twats like Not Such a Lady, Victoria Harvey, who is an ex-girlfriend of Prince Andrew, trying to say that the photograph couldn't possibly be real. She's been to the house posing as someone wanting to buy it, took a photo, the scale's all wrong. Look, the photo was taken on a disposable camera, and on March the 10th, it was developed down in Florida on March the 13th. So she's gone from London back to Florida. She's developed her roll of film. It's printed on the back with it. It's been absolutely verified. Her father has said that he saw it before, well before this, actually, at the time. So there's no reason for anyone to doctor it. This lady Harvey is absolutely bonkers. She is just, she's known, the group that she's in is just defined or called through media as sort of one of these, aristocratic enablers of Prince Andrew. So she sues Prince Andrew, and he settled in New York in February 2022. Now, sure, we don't see royals going through court, right? So maybe he wouldn't be able to go through court, but he settled for an undisclosed sum. It's said to be around somewhere like 21 or 24 million Australian dollars. I'm not sure of the amount. She's previously received $500,000. And she made a substantial donation to her own charity with that money. So I'm going to get to what I really want to talk to you about. I just wanted to lay that all down. What I think people need to look at is, okay, so number one, look, whether she was sort of a willing participant because of her mindset, because of what she'd been through, whether, there's a thing that people who are abused, there's a thing that they do, and that is that they don't want to give the power and control to their abusers, right? That is to say, oh, I was a fool and I was abused and I've been used. Oh, look how stupid I am. Look how weak I am. Look what a fool I've been. Oh, I'm not special. I'm maybe I'm trash because they're treating me like that. So they go, they regain their power. They attempt to regain their power by, no, I'm cool with this. I'm in control. I am the one. I'm the young person. I'm using these men. It's, it's me that's using these men. So sorry, guys. So that's what I want to have this chat about. So the flow, I'm going to hopefully flow better for you now, okay? Because this is something I know a bit about. I don't really know much about Virginia Giuffre beyond, I haven't been following all the court cases. I don't know when and how all her TV appearances relate to each of the lawsuits. I'm not sure of all the names of the different players, but I've followed bare bones for ever since she first was a public figure. But what I feel I can talk more passionately about is something that I think it's what I see, and it's how I relate to things when I see these cases and hear about what these people have been going through. Okay, you like these colors, Julianne? Yeah, I probably need to try and wear more of these colors rather than, yeah. Anyway, so we need to consider what trauma outcomes people have who've lived through childhood abuse. Could be physical, psychological, sexual. It's also involving neglect, okay? But it really is a factor here because things don't get better generally. They don't often get better. They just get worse. Things escalate. They can sort of be subdued for a while when you might be feeling like you're in a bubble of safety, but then what can happen for these victims, for these sufferers, is anything that goes off, takes them off that equilibrium. It's not like for regular people where they might have coping skills and can recalibrate. Now, I think resilience, and if we went back to astrology, and if you believed in such, you would see that Virginia had a lot of resilience, maybe more so than one should expect for what she's been through, and it's probably what's maybe stood her in good stead up until now. But think of her background. We don't know everything about it that we need to. We don't know whether the abuse at 7 years old, how long grooming was happening before that. We don't know what sort of events led up to it. We don't know what the event was, how many, for how long. Could have just been a one-off. We don't know. It was dramatic enough and obviously traumatic to start destroying her brain. Okay, so what happens with wild abuse, really bad abuse and neglect, is it destroys the grey matter of the brain, because the overstimulation, it's all to do with how cortisol works in the brain. When the child is in fight or flight so consistently, brain damage occurs. Okay, so, and actually there's it shows up in female victims and male victims differently. Female victims more often present to healthcare facilities. They make a lot of suicide attempts, etc. Men are more often likely to end up incarcerated, committing acts of violence rather than self-harm, and, doing things to try and acquire drugs and alcohol. So the effects on psychological development, experts agree, the origins of personality disorders coming from childhood and adolescence. When you think about when your brain is only fully developed at 25 years old, thinking about most children who are abused, did you know that they're abused before a year old? And then a large percentage, between 3 and 4, and so on and so on. But childhood trauma is so damaging. So you end up with a person whose brain has persistent decline over time. It affects cognition, affectivity, interpersonal function, and impulse control. It impacts health, like your survival, your development, your sense of security. It results in mood disorders, substance abuse, suicidal behavior, peptic ulcer disease, and diseases like HIV and STDs. Some of the disorders are the paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, ASPD, so antisocial personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, and avoidant personality disorder. These things that there aren't cures for either, okay? And they are degenerative. And, people might say, but, have your CBT and your DBT. People need to be able to commit to that. It might soothe, and it might soothe alongside medication, but it's very complex, because having someone get help and remain in help, it's not always going to be the case. Depending on a lot of other factors, this is why this is so broad. 30 to 90% of patients in studies with borderline personality disorder have a history of child abuse or trauma. It's just too depressing. Yeah. Yeah. And all right, so with borderline personality disorder, it's probably in around 1 to 3% of any population. Someone living with borderline personality disorder, they have to live with emotional dysregulation, impulsive behavior, identity disturbances, interpersonal conflicts. Imagine how hard it is to maintain relationships. Imagine how hard it is to be with a partner when you have these issues. And yeah, as I was saying before, it appears to be higher in females, but it's just that they present so much more often in for help of different types. Could be for eating disorders and that sort of thing, and suicidality. But it's probably just nearly equal, probably because both boys and girls are abused. So the biological and neurological stresses lead to DNA methylation, so it impairs your usual brain functioning. It interferes with emotional regulation and stability, impulse control, etc., coping skills, cognition. And men are just less likely to seek help, but they're acting out in other ways that gets them into a lot of trouble. The overaction of the hypothalamic pituitary axis, so the HPA, let's just say. You've all heard of the pituitary gland, right? So this excess cortisol production, because what happens when you're frightened, and you're in that fawn, fight, freeze, flight state of fear, cortisol is flooding your brain. This mechanism consistently prepares your body for fight or flight response and misinterprets standard environmental signals as a threat. So the constant overstimulation leads to reduction in the volume of hippocampus, actuation of the amygdala, and impairment of the prefrontal, frontal, and limbic anoparietal areas. These changes lead to changes in personality, as seen in borderline personality disorder. People have a lot of misconceptions about what an abusive child is, because they see someone, she loves daddy so much. It's because they're fawning. That child is in just as much cortisol overload and fear as a child that is shutting down in other ways or acting out. Maybe other hormone. When you're not neurotypical, Natus, when you go through menopause, your symptoms are going to be amplified. If you've got ADHD, if you're autistic, if you do have BPD, etc. These are danger times, because everything is amplified by hormonal changes. That really is a fact. So children that are fawning, that is just another way of, they'll bring a cup of tea and they sit and they're very loving and gentle, because they are saying, don't kill me, So it's often, yeah, there's a lot that's misinterpreted. Yeah, just like, the way it shows up in adults and the help that they're getting or not getting can be misinterpreted. Julianne says, and no matter how long the treatment, it's hard to get out of fight and flight since childhood. The nervous system's never the same. Exactly. On a trigger, on a hair trigger, okay? And so can you imagine what divorce does, that rejection does to one? Sense of self. It's like you fail to exist. It's just how to, anyway, we're getting to that. So what happens with this HP axis? It leads to neurohormonal change and adrenal, cortisol, the nervous system. It's really disruptive, isn't it, of these things? And this, self-harming behavior is really apparent in people suffering this, suicide attempts when things are going wrong. I know people with this condition that, the amount of suicide attempts, if they're female, for the female people I know, and then the amount of, the violent acts and things like that for the males, it's really disruptive in their lives. It's like they can't regulate. So if you tested the cortisol in the blood, urine, or saliva of people with or without the comorbid PTSD that is often, a hallmark of HPA, it's really increased. It's going to be present in great load. That's what is noticed. It's medically known. So all this increased blood flow, the oxygen flow, the cortisol, it's decreasing the size of the hippocampus. It's decreasing your gray matter, the actual brain matter. And MRIs show how these brain changes occur in people with this, right? This is events happening to a human being when they're really vulnerable, having an effect on their actual brain. It is brain damage. It is brain damage. Causes memory loss as well. So common is narcissistic personality disorder and BPD, and eventually we're going to just have a chat about Virginia in recent times, right, with regards to these. So narcissistic personality disorder would look more like, that need for attention, the need for praise. It does lead to intimate partner abuse. These people can prioritize their own feelings. They, lack empathy, and can be highly manipulative. Anybody that's been close to someone with narcissistic personality disorder or even narcissistic traits will tell you how manipulated they were, how only that person's feelings mattered. If they were happy, everything was all right, you know what I mean? With borderline personality disorder, they struggle with abandonment fears. They become highly controlling, and actually can perpetrate verbal, emotional, psychological, and physical abuse. Everything is, it's this huge effort to avoid rejection. Hi, Miranda. That is their goal. A rejection is worse than death. It's literally, it would be so painful, so physically painful. It takes over everything. They're unable to function and needing to see that. How are you? I'm doing a really bad job here. I just wanted to lay out a little bit about Virginia. and what has happened. And then I'm just thinking how it's probably impossible that Virginia Roberts Guiffre has not ended up with a personality disorder with everything that she's been through. And I look, I'm not saying 100%, yeah, she wasn't unalived, as they say, but I don't think she was. I do believe, and when people do that, it's like you are not seeing her. It's like you're not seeing that childhood damage. You're not seeing the girl that she is and was, and how she was created, how the pain that she's living in now was created. It's really diminishing of her. That's what I think. It really erases her true victimhood, and it doesn't help shed light on the cause and effect of people who grow up to be like Virginia. It just doesn't feed understanding at all. And it's just knee-jerk conspiracy theorists who couldn't stop to consider something in their mind for even a split second. It just, the climate that we've got now. Sorry, I'm sounding so whiny. The climate that we've got now is, it's perfectly acceptable to be knee-jerk. All those people that are repeating, oh, she said clearly and categorically, she came out and said, I'm not suicidal. Those people don't even know when she said that. She said it in 2019 at the Prince Andrew time, when she was getting all that money for settling out of court, when that was all going on. It's 5-6 years old. She's not saying it now. What she's actually showing the world is something different, and we'll eventually get to that. I just want to make sure I've outlined this. Okay, so how BPD and maybe NPD can look, what it can look like in a relationship, maybe or to anyone around her, but usually to intimates, children, husband, wife, etc. Bullying, belittling, criticizing, raging, sarcasm, demanding, threatening, shaming, blaming, emotional manipulation. How they do that, distorting reality, gaslighting people, right? Playing the victim, using guilt trips, just the lies and exaggeration to manipulate that person. Okay, so maybe into not leaving them, for example, or doing something that they want, that sort of thing. And it can turn physical, hitting, punching, kicking, pushing, and how Victoria would have Virginia, I'm so sorry, would have avoided having any personality disorder. I just can't see it. And I think I would like to know more, though, about her husband. What sort of relationship they had, why they got involved, wouldn't that just be so interesting? What was the beginning of their relationship like? I really hope that he has just tried to support her and then it's just become untenable. So, how can people like this help? Because, as I was just saying, cognitive behavior therapy, that used to be heralded as the big thing in psychiatry to help people, but I don't really know that it does, not for something really serious. This is where you recognize and alter your thought patterns. You're trying to recognize how things begin, what the origins are, nip them in the bud and change your behaviors. And then dialectical behavior therapy, to help regulate your emotions, manage stress, and that one's very much about how to manage your relationships and things. but you need medication as well, and you need long-term support, and you need to want to do it. And if you're in periods of your life when you're out of control, how are you doing these things? It's terrible. I think it's people perpetrating childhood trauma against these innocent people are giving them a terminal illness. They're giving them a mortal wound. So, Virginia, I don't know what's happened with the breakdown of her relationship, because she has alleged violence from her partner. He's a martial arts trainer. Now, sure, he could do some damage, but also that training is as a discipline, not to just be losing your head and be beating up random people and beating up your wife. Of course, anything can happen. But he's alleging assault against her as well. And, if the relationship is deteriorating, it's possible, her devastation would have been overwhelming. Can you imagine the rage that she felt, what turmoil she was in? Put frantic, the splitting, suicidal, wanting to harass that person, manipulate the person that's committed this so-called, this you'd see as a crime against you, right? It's dreadful. So they were living north of Perth, and she's bought a farm. People are trying to make a lot of the fact that this property has, fencing and everything, security cameras and barbed wire fence. I've been to that area and other rural areas in Australia, but I've particularly driven through there. All the rural properties have this type of fencing. They have a really specific type of fencing, and there's a lot of it, and lots of video cameras as well to protect their property. That area has sheep, but there's wallabies, kangaroos, all sorts of wildlife going through, and you want to protect your property from it. And people have fencing like that. It's just so ridiculous that people try to make a meal of it, okay? But of course she would want to feel safe, and she deserved to try to feel safe. But the thing was, she wasn't. She should have been hospitalized after that, Instagram message went out accidentally. That was supposed to be private to a family. Now think about that, private to a family, manipulating her family, trying to tell her children, Mummy's dying. If you don't come and see me, I'm going to be dead in 4 days. You'd better come and see me. That is manipulation. She is trying to control them. She's trying to get them back under her control. She feels like, that desperation to just have that physical control, just to have them in front of her, to just try again to gain control. That is a BPD snap. That is... The courts are well aware that nowadays people that are accusing their the partner that they're separating from, going through court custody for children, etc., court for custody of children, courts are quite aware these days that the person making the accusation is now very often the person that is narcissistic, that is the abuser, okay? Just as an aside. So can you imagine, we don't know what the spiral has been like. Maybe every time over the years Virginia's been through crisis, maybe every time it's just been bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's hard for people, it's probably maybe hard for her husband to leave, because imagine the guilt of leaving someone that is a victim, has been traumatized. But perhaps she was just, this would probably have to be the most difficult disorder. This family of disorders, this cluster B, so to speak, it's the worst to try to live with for a partner, for family. But just know it is created. It's created by trauma. It's created by brain damage, by that person suffering fear okay, when they're a child and when they're so young and they can't process. And then imagine not getting help that you need and being allowed into the den of predators yet again and allowed to go off traveling with them as a minor. Can you imagine coping with that? And the brain damage amps up. It's degenerative. It just happens and happens and happens. Okay, and well, she's a survivor of these things, but she was victimized. And sure, the person that she was maybe made through all these events in her life, she probably has done things that she didn't really like or wouldn't want to admit to, which is, but it's because she's you know, she's been groomed into things. And as I was saying, when you're trying to when you're trying to have a feeling of control, you sort of flip things so that you're saying, oh no, this is my choice. I'm deciding this. This is, you know, I'm not a victim. I'm in control. I've got the power, you know. So I can't say that that wasn't happening with Virginia. And when eventually, you know, her husband's divorcing her, that is just, everything's blowing up. And that's where the manipulation comes in, of trying to manipulate her family just to see her children again, or just, you know, who knows what would have happened. And, you know, and this is where the suicidality comes in. It is not rare at all. This is a very common pattern. This is the pattern over and over again with people in these positions, with these conditions, suffering this type of life event. And it's practically a cliche. It's textbook. It is textbook. No one had a reason to take Virginia out. She's named other names. No one else has sued her except for this. I can't remember the name. Is it Rita O or someone like that? Rita On? I'm not sure of her name. I'm so sorry, but you can look it all up. You know, her father appearing on Piers Morgan now, and you know, previous years has said, oh, you know, Virginia makes a lot of stories up, but today or whenever recently, saying that, you know, she's a victim, she was unalive, you know, he's thinking now she didn't commit suicide. It's just, fuck off, dude. You haven't been a father to her. He's trying to say, no, when she went to Australia, we lost contact because she's just trying to protect me because it was all going to amp up. She just wanted to protect you. Maybe she felt like she could finally close the door on him, you know, because he let her down so badly, her mother too, and her stepmother, you know, or mother. Yeah, mother. And they were estranged for many, many years. How would he frickin' know? He's trying to say no, that, you know, they wanted to take her out. No, they didn't. They've got no need to. And this is related to what she's been through, compounded by the childhood trauma. She's just had trauma upon trauma upon trauma. Imagine how she felt about herself and her history. And in a way, you can't blame a person for kind of wanting to rewrite it somehow. I don't know. But everything is complicated. There's 3,000 sides to everything, right? And I just think this is a culmination of childhood trauma leading to worse and worse decisions, leading to get caught up in terrible, terrible things, leading to be, ripe for the abuse. unlike the 14-year-old girl who, hey, she just wasn't the right pick, was she? By those groomers, by those abusers, the one who in 2005 went to the Palm Beach police. Virginia didn't go to the Palm Beach police. See how damaged she is. She's got a naked Jeffrey Epstein on a table in front of her, Ghislaine Maxwell showing her how to getting her to massage him, and she's still saying, I thought they were nice people. That's a troubled soul. Maybe because, why? He only wanted her to touch him that time, unlike this other Eppinger. Who knows? She was caught up in these webs of these powerful sex trafficking men, 2 of them at different times in her preteen and teen life. After being abused at 7 years old, what do you think this has done? And practically and just let down from by family. Their father working at this place and just letting her down. To me, it seems so obvious that she has brain damage, that she did have a personality disorder, either BPD or NPD, and that's something that was done to her. And now she's got to deal with it, and it's absolutely debilitating, and really, and it's not healable. It's not treatable, really. And the huge wound has happened. You've heard of the narcissistic wound. Well, there's the BPD wound. And with the court event coming up to do with the custody of the children, I think this, as I've said in past posts and things, this is a woman in crisis. This is a desperate woman. This is a woman who needed to be put into hospital under lock and key. Yes, take away her human rights and stabilize her. It might have been impossible, but she needed to be sectioned. I don't know if we call that here in Australia. That's where I'm from at the moment, Jack the Guy. She needed to be sectioned, put into hospital, medicated, and on suicide watch. This clearly hasn't happened. Now, her family might have spoken up. They maybe shouldn't have said. They should have had a little bit more grace, maybe. But I think they know the speculation that's going to be fueled if they said Victoria died under no suspicious circumstances, or she passed away at her home and just left it at that. I feel like they have had to be, they've kind of been forced to have to say, to point it out, she committed suicide. But, we need the rulings. I think there is going to be an autopsy, and that there will be something made available as to how. I'm not sure, but in a way, really, I know I'm not giving her privacy, but I feel like maybe she needs her privacy about that, and maybe our curiosity doesn't need to be quenched. No matter what the method, someone, we know that these knee-jerkers are going to just say, they won't believe it. They'll come up with a way that how it was done as part of a conspiracy, right? Yeah. But my personal belief, and this is what I immediately thought when I saw what was going on with that Instagram post, I immediately thought, woman in crisis, mental breakdown. This is a mental health crisis. This is wounding. This is personality disorder wounding. This is manipulation at its finest. This is a cataclysmic, epic attempt for control. And I believe that's what's happened, and I do believe she's been in great distress and great danger from herself, and even whether or not she thought that she would suicide. But what people don't understand, they say, oh, narcissistic people, oh, they'd never commit suicide. They're a narcissist. Why would they? They are actually statistically more likely. Okay? So I believe Virginia, rest in peace, Virginia. She did commit suicide. That is just what happened. The bottom line, her family, her 3 children, who I won't name, but her 3 children, she, her daughter, she says that's what inspired her to really break out. Once she had the birth of her own daughter, she could see clearly more what the reflection, thinking about that little baby girl and then thinking about her own life made her want to stand up against things. That youngest child, I think she's only 14 now, 15, and living through this. We've got to be, I know I'm saying, hey, the father let her down, and I don't know much about the husband, but yeah, it's just a sad and tragic situation that has its seeds. It has its seeds all those years ago in 1990 or before, and that's that. All right, thank you, everybody. I'll see you later. Thanks for being here, and yeah, leave a comment. What do you think? Do you think I'm right? Does what I say make sense? I think it makes perfect sense. To me, it's just, I can look at that with clarity. Now, I can't know all about what she's gone through, the ups and downs, but I imagine there were lots of ups and downs. And I imagine she probably, that family, there were places and times in her life when they've just been this regular, lovely family. She has been making a huge effort to raise her kids. And I know how complicated it is for children of people with BPD. It's really conflicting for them. But yeah, it's just a story of a lot of trauma, abuse, really disrespecting other human beings and what's happened, and all the fallout from that and what it creates. And I think what we should be looking into is, rather than trying to blame individuals, is to try and blame the system. And why was Virginia not in a psychiatric hospital? Against her will, I know, but to keep her alive, maybe try and stabilize her and get her through the next little bit. But I think sometimes things are so devastating, it's very hard to pull out. You just don't, it's just you feel like you can't move from second to second with that kind of wound. It's like it's huge shock and grief and fear, and people with borderline personality disorder, if they really just don't have a sense of self and everything, and it's like they've been destroyed, they can't see into the future to think how's best to move forward so that I can work through this and eventually get to a place where, you can enjoy what I can out of life without this person. It's hard to describe that huge change, but I think I know a little bit of how it feels. And I think Virginia was so resilient. I think that is how she was able to get as far as she did in the first place. But even resilient people, there was so much stacked against her. She certainly probably has been a perpetrator of all sorts of things in her own way. And life probably, while she was probably greatly loved, she's probably caused a lot of pain as well. And it is a reflection of her own pain. And there are people that it should, they're never going to be accountable for that, but they are to blame. They created that. So anyway, I'll see you later.